Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, non-binary, distinguished guests, welcome to Ridiculous, the Life of a Clown. So, Jonathan, welcome to Ridiculous, Life of a Clown. Please tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Hey, what's up? I'm Jonathan Rockett. I am a human first, a clown many years ago, and now I am creating a epic clown documentary.
Wonderful. So going back to the Once Upon, what brought you to clown in the first place?
When I was 7-ish years old, I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I remember my dad mowing the lawn. We had a typical backyard with a big fence around it, and we had to pull all our toys onto the patio. And he said, can't get in the grass for 2 hours. And we had a bunch of tennis balls. And so I was bored for a couple of hours, and I started juggling. And I taught myself to juggle, and that was kind of the start of it. And I grew up with a unique background. I was homeschooled kindergarten through 12th grade, and I had a very specific, unique desire and love for vaudeville and Jerry Lewis and Buster Keaton. And so in all my free time, that's what I did. I watched old movies and wanted to learn how to juggle and do magic. So that's how it started.
Oh, that's very cool. So you taught yourself to juggle? How did that go?
It was tennis balls, and I just figured it out.
That's amazing.
And then we moved to another house. We had a basement and it had kind of a high ceiling, and I used to spend probably 4 to 5 hours a day downstairs practicing juggling. So I got up to 7 balls and clubs and fire, and then I mowed lawns in the summer as a job, and I saved up enough money, and I bought a unicycle, and I learned to ride a unicycle in about 5 hours on a Saturday, and that was the start of clowning for me.
That's amazing. So, I mean, you're teaching yourself all these skills. This is all pre-YouTube. This is all back in the day when you shouldn't just go on the internet and find a tutorial, yeah?
God, yeah. So this is probably, let's see. When I was 7, it was 1983.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. Did you take any classes, or were you entirely self-taught as a kid?
Yeah, so what happened was, so I started doing that. I was always a little entrepreneur, and I wanted to make money, and I was babysitting a lot. I had a bunch of brothers, and my older brother had kids, and I was great with kids, so I started doing birthday parties, and I was looking for a way to make money without, trying real hard, and I was obsessed with magic and clowning, and so I was like, well, I could do this. And next thing you know, my mom is driving me around. I'm 12 years old to my gigs. I'm charging $100 an hour doing birthday parties, and that's how it started. And then I found a clown school. It was a 12-week course by the guy who I consider my mentor, Bill Boots, who runs Healthy Humor now, which was a Big Apple Circus, hospital clowning. Mm-hmm. And he was a Ronald McDonald back in the day, and he's done a bunch of different characters anyway. And that's where I had some real actual training. There was a magic shop in Baltimore, Maryland, close to where I lived, called the Fun House, and I used to go up there every weekend and learn magic and talk shop with the guys that worked there. And it was funny because I bought a magic illusion the other day, and I smelled it and realized it didn't smell like cigarettes. And I thought that the way magic is real is if it smells like cigarette smoke, because this place, the Funhouse Magic Shop, always smelled like cigarettes, because the guy, Lou Walston, who's passed away now, always was smoking in there. So then I had some training. We covered, clown basics, and that's where I, learned about sort of the pragmatic side of clowning, and clown types and commedia dell'arte and, whiteface, Auguste, tramp clowns, and, figured it all out.
What kind of clown were you?
I was an Auguste clown. I was a big fan of like Lou Jacobs. And I had a couple of cool like kismet things happen. So I started clowning, like I said, when I was about 12, and then was doing birthday parties and parades and grand openings, picnics and things like that. And did a little bit of training, was unicycling, juggling, fire eating, and doing some of that stuff. There was an essay contest in the Washington Post. Now I was growing up in, suburban DC, Maryland. And the essay was, why do you want to be in the circus? And the grand prize for the essay contest was you get to spend a day in the circus as a clown. And I wrote an essay and I won it, and that was the red unit, I want to say 1992, and it was David Larible. So my mind was blown as a kid. And I got there and they were like, oh my God, your name is Johnny Rockett. There was a guy at the time named John Weiss who was the human cannonball. They called him Johnny Rockett. And they were like, well, we can't call John Weiss that anymore because you're the real Johnny Rockett. As a kid, this was just, it was a giant fantasy. And so the next day, Steve Smith was holding auditions for Clown College, and he was the dean of Ringling Clown College at the time. And I was way too young, but they let me audition because I had the little guest clown thing, and we had a big, clown audition, and he called me up. We were doing the classic Dead and Alive, and I was the only one who knew it already. And so he called me up. So I did Dead and Alive with Steve Smith, and they were basically like, yeah, when you turn 17, you've got a spot. So went back, poured a bunch of energy into it, started a magic show called The Dream Factory. We toured up and down the East Coast. I had a couple partners and kept doing, typical, corporate clown gigs. And then when I was 15 or 16, I want to say, went to Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus and ended up, talking to somebody. I don't even know exactly how it happened, but basically they gave me a spot there. I ended up sitting with the band, met the ringmaster Jimmy James at the time and the boss clown Chris Smiley Bear, and then we did like 2 or 3 performances together, and they were like, hey, when you turn 17 and you're old enough, come over, you got a spot. And so that was that. And then long story short, I was homeschooling. I finished high school. I had a theater scholarship to a college in Michigan and ended up going to regular college and studying acting. So that's how it happened. So I didn't follow the circus life.
Still, I mean, that's a hell of a pedigree to start with. So theater scholarship, pursuing acting, where did that take you?
It took me to a corporate job, like it takes everybody. Yeah. So interestingly enough, in my senior year in college, I contracted Lyme disease, and I was pretty much paralyzed for a year and a half. Like I had major joint problems and massive pain, and couldn't stand up, and dropped out of college in the last semester of my senior year, and went home, lived with my parents for a little while, and then was on my back for a long time and fell in love with art and design, and was reading a lot of episodes of Architectural Digest and Elle Decor. And as soon as I was well enough, I got an apartment with a buddy of mine from college, and I got a job in the interior design industry. And so I ended up doing interiors for 10 years. So nothing to do with clowning, performing, acting, or any of that.
Well, I mean, that's not uncommon. it is. I think it's far more uncommon to make a living in our chosen field than to have to make a living somewhere else. And it's always something of a shock when someone is professionally full-time performer, and that's always amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the clown documentary that you're building up to.
Yeah, man. So, well, I have to say, first of all, I just stumbled on your podcast, and you and I spoke briefly before, but as far as you and I know, it's the only clown podcast there is. And so I got to give you a big shout out, because I don't know who else is championing this art form right now. And I guess the way it started was, this is a big passion and an old chapter in my life. And I have a bunch of memorabilia and my old clown shoes from Ringling and stuff around the house. And I have a good buddy who lives here. I'm in LA, and he's a director of photography. And he was hanging out. We're talking clowns, and I'm like going through, my big, diatribe about clown types and the history of clowns. And he's like, man, God dang it, you know a lot about clowns. We should do a documentary. And I was like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's probably a documentary out there that's pretty relevant. And I looked around, and, I don't have to tell you, there really freaking isn't, And especially, covering sort of a not only the history of clowning, but the way that clown fits into, contemporary culture and how it's evolving, because clearly it's evolved a lot. I know you could get into the weeds about that. So I said, well, I don't know, let's look into it. And sure enough, no, there's no documentary. And I said, well, I don't know, maybe, this is a calling situation and I'm the person who's supposed to do it. I don't have a great career in clowning, but I certainly have more than, a dusting with clowning. And I think it's an art form that is profoundly misunderstood, especially. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think it's more than ample to create a history of clowning right now. And, so I've been reaching out to some of my clown heroes. I've talked to, Jeff Raz and John Gilkey and, John Towson and Bill Boots, all these guys, Steve Smith, and everybody's excited. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and, I think it's something that has to happen. So the documentary itself doesn't have like a super structure. Of course, we're in a giant fucking pandemic right now. So nobody's performing. All the schools are closed. There's really nothing to do except to reach out and, grab mind share from the people who are the movers and shakers in the industry. And, I think, well, for instance, your user base, I guess, is probably, I'd assume it's mostly clowns.
That'd be my guess, yeah.
So I guess I would say, if you're listening to this and you're a clown, you're a contemporary clown, I would love to hear from you, because we have to tell your story. We have to tell the story of clowns and sort of retool and remake this art form, and explain why it's awesome. But I don't think it has to be explained. I think if you just see it, you'll understand. But, I know you've gotten in the weeds before on, scary clowns, why people hate clowns, and all those things. I don't want it to be, something about here's why clowns are awesome, or here's a history of clowns from 5th century Egypt and court jesters all the way through. No, it's not that. It is a love letter to clowning, and it is sprinkled with some awesome history of clowning, but also a beautiful picture of clowns today and what they're doing and what that art form means.
So that's going to be amazing. So, you're still in the pre-production phase, right?
Yep, correct. Yep. Yeah, we can't do diddly because, COVID. But we're just reaching out to everybody. And so I guess, for this, podcast, I'd call it a call to all clowns. If you have a great story, or you want to be part of this documentary, or you want to be part of the history and the telling of modern clowning in America and the world, we definitely want to hear from you. I just, right before I got on the podcast, bought the domain clowndocumentary.com.
Nice.
Yes. So I'm creating an email address probably tomorrow morning. Of course, by the time this goes live, it'll be ready to go. You can email us at hi@clowndocumentary. We'd love to see any video, photos, anything that you have performance-wise. If you have an awesome story, you definitely want to tell it, because, clowning as an art form is something that's never going away, despite how much people misunderstand it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the rest of, and the audience knows this, but the rest of the world has a very different perspective on clown than Western culture, especially in America, where it's still considered a viable art form, and circus is still a major part of society in other parts of the world, much more so than it is here today. Let's talk a little bit more about the philosophy of clown, and then we'll come back to the movie before we wrap up. What is integral to the work of a clown? What's its function in society? Why clown?
That's a great question. I think that clown is a mirror of our own insecurities, honestly. So going back to how I started, there was a movie, and I'll tell you two weird stories that are like circuitous, and when I say them in retrospect, I'm like, oh my God, that really happened. So the first one is this. I saw a movie called Three Ring Circus. It was a Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin movie. It was my favorite movie as a kid. I was probably 10 years old. Watched that movie like 100 times. I wanted to be Jerry Lewis. To me, Jerry Lewis is the ultimate clown. And in that movie, they were in a fictitious circus called Clyde Brent Circus. And the reason they called it Clyde Brent Circus is because on the tents there was a big CB. But actually, they shot that circus with Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, so it was CB Clyde Beatty, right? And they just changed the name, obviously, for licensing. And that circus, of course, was the circus that I ended up performing in, and getting a spot in later. So that was like a full circle thing. Then, the Ringling Brothers story that I told earlier, where I won the writing contest. After college, I ended up working for a interior design company that did office space. We were like a Herman Miller dealership and sold, office furniture, and did space planning for office buildings in DC. One of my first clients was Feld Entertainment.
Nice.
And it had nothing to do with my connection. It was an account that I inherited from a guy who was retiring and was like, yeah. So in Northern Virginia, it was in Alexandria, Virginia. He was like, yeah, I'm going to give you this account. It's Feld Entertainment. I ended up like putting the desk and the chair for Kenneth Feld in his office, shaking his hand, and like designing his personal office for Feld Entertainment. So it was like this weird, circular situation. Because of that, I've always kept the clowning chapter of my life very sacred. Even though at 43 now, and this was 23 years ago, that was the end of it. So yeah, to your question, what role does it have? Yeah, I think, especially, not to get too political, but especially in the time that we're at, where everything is so polarized and so just, goddamn serious, like the stakes are so high, but they're really not. when we can laugh at the stuff that connects us all, I think that's where people really understand what it is to be human. And I think clowning is one of the only art forms that allows us to do that still.
Nice. Yeah, I can't disagree with that in any way. So, what are your next steps as far as the movie production goes? What's the next step? And in the long run, what do you think your timeline's going to be?
Yeah, great question, man. And I wish I had a super awesome answer, but the truth is, I expect this to go on for at least a year, because we're at the stage right now that we're at where we're just reaching out to all the major contemporary players in clowning and figuring out what it is. Like, I have a decent idea of a storyline and an approach. I also know that it's going to evolve organically, and part of that is going to come from the clowns that we interact with and talk to. So again, like with your podcast, we want to hear from all these clowns because it's going to help shape how we talk about clowning in contemporary times. This isn't going to be a history of clowning, like I said. It's also not going to be super pegged into a niche, but we are going to pepper in some clown history. People need to understand the background of the art form and why it's so powerful. We're going to cover women in clowning, Black people in clowning. I'm going to be talking to Veronica Blair and the Uncle Junior Project, and
Great.
Understanding how all of the people who have contributed to this art form over the last couple hundred years have made it what it is. And beyond that, I'm trying not to have a super strong, opinion on how it turns out. I want it to, form itself. Honestly.
Organically, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So as far as getting a hold of you for the clown documentary, clowndocumentary.com.
Yep, exactly. You can go to clowndocumentary.com. Just bought it today. By the time you edit this and put it up, there will be a email form on there. I would encourage all of your listeners to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. We're going to be going to, San Francisco. I'm here in LA and New York and England and all over the world to, get a really good, beautiful glimpse of modern clowning.
Nice. I don't think we discussed, we talked about in the past in our conversations about Steve Smith and Jeff Draz and John Gilkey and I think Lorenzo Pizzoni a little bit, about all these other people. I would also suggest David Melendi, who is a clown out of Switzerland right now. He's from the States and moved to Switzerland. Would also be a good connection for getting into the European clown circuit and connecting with people over there. I didn't realize the documentary was going that global, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, one of the things, as I've started digging in after 2 decades of being out of it, I was on Amazon and I found this book called Clown Paintings. Diane Keaton, the actress, who's in a bunch of Woody Allen movies and whatever, but she's been obsessively collecting paintings of clowns for years.
Oh, that's amazing.
She put a book together here, your readers can't see it, but it looks like this. And she's got commentary from Woody Allen, Dan Aykroyd, Carol Burnett, Phyllis Diller, Carrie Fisher, Whoopi Goldberg, Jay Leno, Jerry Lewis, Gary Marshall, Steve Martin, Harold Ramis, on and on and on about their thoughts on clowning. And it's super awesome. And then one of the other, so I'm going to be reaching out to her and some of these celebrities to hear, really what, mainstream popular actors feel about the, niche art form of clowning. And then, of course, there's the clown egg register in Wookie Hole, right? So that. So we're going to be going to England and seeing that. So we're going to be looking for somebody in the UK, ideally, or maybe in the US if we have to take them there, and follow that journey. Somebody getting their actual, face registered on an egg. as cheesy as it is, it's part of the
Yeah.
nomenclature, right? And all that stuff. So we're gonna try and go through as much as possible. So.
Okay, two more larger questions before we wrap up. You mentioned Jerry Lewis and vaudeville and black and white comedy. What are three pieces of media or performers that you feel are underrated and that more clowns should be aware of and consuming?
Oh, great question. I would say maybe. I think that most clowns should pay attention to stand-up.
Okay.
And I say that despite the fact that my bent for clowning is nonverbal, but I do think that stand-up right now is one of the last remaining art forms that's one person with a microphone on stage, and it's very, very hard to entertain people with nothing but your body on a stage, right? So I guess maybe the second piece of maybe Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorites, aside from Jerry Lewis, is Danny Kaye. There was a movie that was one of my favorite movies as a kid, The Court Jester. I don't know if you remember that one. The pellet with the poison is the vessel with the pestle, and the chalice from the palace has the brew that is true. It's such a beautiful breakdown of the English language and play on words. It's awesome. I would definitely say watch old Danny Kaye movies, and then music. I think every clown should learn to play an instrument, because I do think that there is a musicality to the way our bodies move. Talking about Jerry Lewis again, like, he never played an instrument, but if you go back and watch Jerry Lewis, he had this almost virtuosic ability to interact with music with his body and conduct an entire piece of music. And you watched him and you said, oh my God, he's literally making this music happen. Of course he's not, but he understands. So I'd say, yeah, music, Danny Kaye, Jerry Lewis. That's my three.
Okay. Here's another three. Who are three people you think should be on the podcast?
Great question. Because I've been out of the clown industry for so long. I would definitely say Bill Boots. And I'm going to put him in touch with you. He runs, like I said, Healthy Humor, which is Big Apple's hospital clowning. He's absolute amazing, beautiful human being. He's my mentor. And I would say yeah, I couldn't name three, man.
Okay, but Bill Boots, that's great. So yeah, put me in contact. And while we're talking about stand-up and clowns, in LA, aside from the lady who did Nate, that Netflix special, which was amazing. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's just a brilliant modern clown. It's on Netflix. She's an actress from LA. She was involved with the Idiot Workshop, John Gilkey's thing, for a little while. Nate is amazing for adults only. Absolutely adults only, but it's on Netflix. Donnie Devonian and Alec Jones Trujillo, both stand-up / clowns out of LA, that I would definitely suggest looking up and looking at their work, because they're both amazing. And they're, again, both came out of We Are Nudes and Wet the Hippo and the Idiot Workshop, all of which is down there now. Okay, so one last time before I let you go, how can everyone find you and contact you on the internet, just to nail that home?
Yeah, awesome. So for the clown documentary, it's clowndocumentary.com. If you want to find me personally, it's jonathanrockett.com. Yeah, I would absolutely welcome. I'm in a super beautiful phase where I'm just looking to reach out to all the clowns in the world right now. So it's exciting and fun.
Very great, man. It was lovely having you, and we will talk again soon, okay?
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today on Ridiculous Life of a Clown. This program, as always, is made possible by your support through our Patreon, which you can find through www.picklewater.com. Theme song by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech Music.